Soon as I go live, y'all, hold on. Greetings and welcome back once again. This is Amuna. It's my stand by, stand by. All right, all right, all right. I had so many things planned for you this evening. I had scheduled this thing, I think, like 8 o'clock, and then I got distracted because this is what happens. You understand? But after I hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody's doing well. After having all of these thoughts and all of these directions that I possibly wanted to go into, I see this whole R. Kelly case breaks even further. And as I said before in my study and continue study, because I'm not done, of what could possibly have been the issue from childhood, because a lot of times we miss these things and then we have to deal with the difficult things in adulthood. That's kind of the train of thought that I'm following. And so as I see that the story has developed, I wanted to talk briefly about perverted justice, and listening to what the lawyer promised to pursue R. Kelly and his enablers. And many people along the way, as this story was unfolding, was asking about the accountability of those who were in and around him, like the lawyers and the accountants and the runners, the people who were there with him, the people who facilitated, the people who got the numbers and was handing them out and transporting these women from place to place. According to what I understand, they got a tape from 1998 or 99, and they're looking to prosecute. But it's interesting that I actually, before I saw this, I named this something else, and then I decided to name it Perverted Justice. Okay. And one would ask why. Before I do this, if you don't mind, I'm going to take a little blast back to the past. I put it in the bottom of the box. It was something that I was researching, and I said this was interesting. Okay, because I'm looking at the connection, and that's the video I was actually preparing for you. The connection of feminism, early feminism, or which they didn't call feminism, it was called women's rights at that time, and the abolitionist movement, which a lot of us don't know about. A lot of us know about this second wave of feminism, and myself and Sister Mayana has had conversations about this on this channel before, but we know about the second wave of feminism, the 60s and 70s feminism, and we're not that aware of the women's rights movement and the role that it played in the abolition of slavery in the Americas. And come to find out, as I was uncovering, also in England, the petition to abolish the slave trade was by a female abolitionist. So that's some interesting information. My thing is, if we're going to look at history, we have to look at all of history and not just look at history that reinforces our narrative, that makes us make everything, pun intended, black and white, but really look at what was happening in the country and the struggle that was happening and what continues to happen. So when I came across this quote here, shout out to everybody who just joined us. Like I said, I already wanted to do it. So when I see the R. Kelly thing, the human side of me is like, wow, look at those who have not necessarily personal, but whose nation has committed such atrocities. And, justice is not being pursued in the same way. Now, that's not to absorb any individual of their guilt. It's just to look at, like they say, the pot calling the kettle back. It's looking at who is trying to pursue this justice. So in 1836, if you're not familiar, her name is Angelina Emily Grimke, and she was a European. And she was one of the abolitionists and women's rights activists during that time. I think I came on the channel and spoke about last week about the 1830s, around that time, 1820s, 1830s, becoming a hotbed for abolitionist movement, especially the 1830s. Understand, if you're looking at the timeline, and I know the title says R. Kelly, just continue to bear with me, because nothing happens without a starting point, okay? And so this is all what we're experiencing now is what has been left for us because of what has been done before us. And so when this cult of abolition, or it starts happening first in England, whether or not the slave trade was wrong, because remember, England is the one that's wielding the power on the back end of the slave trade, and whether or not it was wrong and whether or not it should be shut down. So in 1808 is the first talks of making it illegal, which it never stopped. But anywho, to continue to traffic bodies from the continent. Okay. And so this conversation comes over to America and ultimately splits the nation about whether or not slavery is inherently wrong and whether or not these sins are going to be revisited on the peoples. Okay. So appeal, and I'm going to go more into this. So for sake of time, appeal to Christian women of the South. This is something that you can put in and pull up and read the entire thing. Okay. Angelina Emily Grimke, New York, and American Anti-Slavery Society, 1836. So like I said, there was always a connection early on with the women's rights movement and the Anti-Slavery Society. Okay. So this is what she said. And I was like, you know what? She said this. Neither a slave nor a free colored person. This is called talking about the Cold War. I'm not sure if I shared it with you guys before, or maybe it was before a lot of you joined me, but I think I'll go back over this Black Code or Code Noir that governed. That was before Jim Crow. It was all of these things that were coded, written and codified and written into the laws that created this systematic racism, white supremacy type construct. Okay. So this is one of these that she is restating some of what in her own words. Neither a slave nor a free colored person can be a witness against any white or free person in a court of justice. However, atrocious may have been the crimes. Atrocious, sorry, may have been the crimes they have seen him commit. So understand what that creates in the mind of the individual. That if you're seeing the European creating a heinous crime, within the law, you could not testify against this person. It says if such testimony would be the benefit of a slave, but they may give testimony against a fellow slave. So when they're talking about, oh, you know, you pull your own down more than you would somebody else of another race and another nationality, understand this is in the law. This is what your grandparents, great grandparents would have understood, that you can pull down your fellow brother or sister, but if you come for a European, then you have transgressed the bounds of the laws that said European has set in place. It says, but they may give testimony against a fellow slave or a free colored man, even in cases affecting life, if the master is to reap the advantage of it. Now, this conversation concerning R. Kelly, why did I bring this in? Because it doesn't seem as though this is purely about justice. And this is purely about seeking justice. I'll share a little bit more about that later. But this is to someone as an advantage. So Angelina Emily Grimke, let's see, 1836, 1936, 2036. So almost 200 years ago, okay, 180 something years ago, was saying that they will allow this discussion to happen if it's to the advantage of the master. If he's going to reap some benefit of this discussion, this conversation, of this public lynching, of this pursuit of, quote, justice, it has to be something in it for him. Something to keep in mind. I didn't make this up. Angelina Emily Grimke is observing this about what was happening in her time. The second one that I found notable, and she listed about, I think, 10 or 12, something to that effect, but there's definitely more. She says, there is in this country a monstrous inequality of law and right. What is a trifling fault? Listen, because a lot of people is like, when such and such did it, he gets a slap on the wrist. But when such and such does it, they get thrown under the jail. Here's what she says. She says, what is a trifling fault in the white man? It's understandable if they rape those young women. They're just college kids. You know what I'm saying? You know, I'll give them a slap on the wrist. This is happening in 2019. But if the same thing happens without any proof on the other side, throw them under the jail. This is what she says. There is in this country a monstrous inequality of law and right. What is a trifling fault in the white man is considered highly criminal in the slave. The same offenses which cost a white man a few dollars only are punished in the Negro with death. Again, do I need to read that for y'all again? Because that's deep. What we are seeing, what happens is we live in a time, she lived in a time where, first of all, it wasn't even cool to say these things. That what she was saying. This is why you were going against the status quo. But they lived in a time where it was more prevalent, right? And it was undeniable. But we live in a time where it's pretended as though we have been far removed from this situation, when the truth and reality, it is not. These laws still apply. Even if they're not, quote, physically on the books, they're still informing the way in which people do business. So you will see, for a drug charge, you will see the melanated body getting way more time than you will see the European, right? You will see all of these things happening, why so much of our people have ended up behind bars, as opposed to others who are still walking in the streets. I'll read that last part again. This was written by abolitionist Emily I think it was actually the Grimke sisters, if I'm not mistaken. Let me give y'all a little bit of that, and then I'm gonna go to R. Kelly, right? I think it was more than one of them, if I'm not mistaken, because I remember coming across them in my studies before. I think it was like two or three of them. The Grimke sisters, yes, Sarah Moore Grimke and Angelina Emily Grimke. It was two of them. It says, I'm gonna read you quickly about who I just read a quote from. It says, and a lot of abolitionists, just to let you know, were also Quakers. Who Quakers were on record, a number of them, namely one I remember, George Fox, earlier on, before the slave trade even got really crazy in America, was on record. He was in the Caribbean. He was on record by saying, yo, what y'all about to do is going to get you in some serious trouble. If I was you, I wouldn't do it. You know what I'm saying? This is what they called the Friends, or the Society of Friends, which was Quakers. So Sarah Moore Grimke and Angelina Emily Grimke, known as the Grimke sisters, were the first American female advocates of abolition and women's rights. They were writers, orators, and educators. They grew up in a slaveholding family in southern United States, but moved to the North in 1820s, settling for a time in Philadelphia and becoming part of its substantial Quaker community. So same thing I just said. So they would have known intimately the system of slavery in the South. And when they went to the North and saw that, yo, this something is off, they joined the Quakers, who Quakers were on record by not even using within their community. They eventually got to where they didn't use within their community goods that were produced by slaves. Okay. And so they joined the Quaker community, and later on they become these abolitionists who are speaking about against what they experienced. I'll say more about that, but I'm gonna continue on, just because, you know, when we're having this conversation and talking about justice and whether or not justice is being perverted and what's left on record, I think it's important to note honestly, to look at history honestly and say, how did we get to this point, and who was advocating? You know, not to say that people did not, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, that type of conversation. I'm not saying that could not or could have been the situation. But if we're not honest about what we're looking at and who was actually instrumental, those who are actually instrumental in fighting against injustice, then we ultimately are perverting justice as well. So, or at least perverting our view of history and rewriting it with alternative facts for our own benefit. You know what I mean? Which I don't think is beneficial for anyone involved. But lawyer promises to pursue R. Kelly and his enablers. This is a question that I know many have asked. I see this online. I've asked, where and who was enabling this person for 20 plus years? They say almost 25 years to be doing what they were doing. And the answer is all the people who were involved. You know what I'm saying? For whatever reason. So now we have a biblical verse that talks about not taking a gift, because a gift blinds the eyes and it essentially perverts justice, right? If we're going to be honest, and I said this before, and I know some people, you know, get in their feelings, because again, we like to rewrite history to what makes us feel comfortable. But the first place in which this ability to prosecute to the fullest extent of the law and receive justice was perverted. And that first situation that went national and international was the situation with Aaliyah. And according to what the information is coming out concerning how her parents decided to deal with this situation, they decided to make it go away quietly. Now, regardless of how we may feel about the person's musical career, this was a perversion of justice. This simple act of allowing it to go away quietly and not persecuting to the fullest extent of the law, or not making it be known and stated plainly that this individual violated, it helped to continue to shape, because by the time he got to that point, he was already well on the makings of who he became. Okay. But this situation, if we are going to be honest, was the first place in which justice was perverted, because the opportunity was there, the evidence was there, the witnesses was there, the case was fresh. And any time that it was asked later on, because to my understanding, there was a non-disclosure agreement signed, anytime that it was asked about later, it was pushed off. It was ignored. You know what I'm saying? And here we are. If we're going to look in retrospect, because we're not the lawyer, we're not the judge, and we don't have no jails, okay? But if we're going to be retrospective, although it may have been difficult at that time, and one of the things that I heard as I'm doing this research, come up is that she had a musical career, a budding musical career. That did not, this person, Robert Sylvester, did not pursue, but she came and was handed to her. No, she was handed to him by his manager, Barry Hankerson, allegedly. Okay, they like to say here, allegedly, that because they saw the promise in him, because they saw the talent, again, the gift blinds the eyes. Everybody keeps saying he's so talented, he's so talented, he's so talented. And the gift, not just a physical gift, but the talent and ability to play music, blind the eyes of the people and perverted justice. And so people went against what was their better judgment because ultimately they wanted to use this individual. And I'm not making a case for the person. What I'm saying is if the lawyer is saying that everybody were enablers, then we have to be honest that not only the people who were working with him were enablers, but the people who wanted something from him enabled him to continue to abuse. Why? Because they lacked, what's the word I'm looking for here? They went against better judgment, and feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comment section. They went against better judgment because ultimately beyond this person was their goal. So beyond R. Kelly was the goal of Aaliyah becoming, and most I rest her, you know what I'm saying? But it's not to say that we can't look back and say, what really happened here based on what's left on record. Because there was a goal to become this star or become this musician, and this person was the means to this end, and this went bad. According to their testimony, they didn't want to derail that. And so they wanted to make it go away quietly. And in going away quietly, it festered and it came back more and more and more. Over the years, there were a lot of people on record, as well as those who were in Surviving R. Kelly documentary, who were getting paid. So we have to talk about enablers. Why are you, if you're experiencing an injustice, why not speak up against the injustice? Why allow a gift to pervert? Let me get that because I keep quoting it right. You're going to be like, where is that in the Bible? I ain't never seen that verse. Hold on. Hold on. Thank you for those who just joined us. And I'm going to read that other part again, as this is nothing new. Within the law is, here it is. Exodus 23:8 says, do not accept a bribe. This is wisdom. It's going to tell you what the bribe does. For a bribe blinds those who see and twists the words of the innocent. Do not accept a bribe, for the bribe blinds the eyes of those who see and twist the words of the innocent. It means you're going to cover up things because while you have been bought, this is the kind of the buying of the soul. So for whatever the case is, people, for their own reasons, as the lawyer was trying to point out, and I believe I put the video in the box, for whatever the reasons, whether it be the peyote, will it be the status, whatever it be, whatever, the person knowing the truth was bought off, and they also contributed to the perversion of justice. Do not perverse justice or show partiality. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the innocent. And it's written in 2 places, and that's Deuteronomy 16 and 19. That is wisdom. This is what we have saw and continue to see, not only in this case, but many cases. But on top of that, universal truth, we also have, for those who just joined us, this particular observation from the Code Noir and from the laws that were placed in place in this country during slavery that we see still exist today. I'll read that again. It says, there is in this country, meaning America, a monstrous inequality of law and right. This was written in 1836 by Angelina Grimke. What is a trifling fault in the white man, as we said before, oh, they were just being boys, oh, they were just being rowdy, is considered highly criminal in the slave. Oh, they're deviants, oh, they're this, oh, they're that. The same offenses which cost a white man a few dollars only are punished in the Negro with death. Okay, so this is why we see the levels of punishment differing. You're not imagining things. This is true. This is the reality. This is some of the residuals from the reason why you were brought here and the ways in which racism is being institutionalized to keep you in your position, right? And so that's kind of what I wanted to bring. I put the links in the box. Let me see what I put here. I put the links in the box. I'm not going to go too long. Right. I did put the full appeal to Christian women. What she wrote this letter in, and let me just give you a little backstory on this. When they were doing a lot of outreach, a lot of these European women and some melanated women started reaching out to other women in the South. So this particular letter is the appeal to the Christian women of the South. Right? And it was written, this one was written in 1836. And it's kind of lengthy, so I'm not going to read it now. But she kind of makes her case in this letter to European women in the South to begin to rise up. This is why the abolitionists were demonized in the South, okay? To begin to rise up to fight against this injustice, right? By trying to use their persuasion to get their husbands and their brothers and their sons and their uncles to look at slavery for what it was and what it is, right? And so that is what that is, and that's where I got the outtake from. So if we don't have any questions or comments, we'll come back and talk about, you're not really going to get gossip from me because I don't really do gossip, but we are going to get a little bit of history, a little bit of understanding what is happening, what continues to happen. Hopefully along the way, whatever happens to this individual, that people can actually learn a lesson from some things that society has missed. One more thing I want to talk about is the enablers was also the music industry. One thing about this individual's career is that all of the perversion was never hid in the music. It wasn't out of plain sight. The condition that, according to study, the possibility of this individual having was right in front of everyone to see. Right. So then the question will be like, who's the record execs? Who are the people who's A&R? Who's the people who are saying, yeah, this is the song we need for the youth? When we're talking about a lot of the victims, because I've listened to a sister read about 3-4 books from the victims. When you listen to a lot of the victims, one of the things that I hear as a common theme amongst them is that they heard his music. One of the victims said, as they're calling her, a survivor, said that when she remembers getting her first disc man with R. Kelly's 12 play music already in there, parents who was giving, this had to be the 90s, their children R. Kelly to listen to. So the music exec and the music industries who know the power of music and the influence that music has, are they enablers? Because they sure did give him a large platform. They sure did give him a space in which he wasn't hiding. It's not like he was, saying one thing and jumping out and doing the next. Like he says it all in his music, which I find disturbing. When I listen back to what we heard, I'm like, what? Seems like you're ready. Girl, are you ready to go all the way? It seems as though you're coaxing and grooming young children into this. But this is something that you would have to have written down. You would have to have, listen, I know a little bit about music, okay, people? I am a recording artist in the reggae industry, so I have recorded, and I know a little something about a little something, okay? And when you when you make a song, right, you have to, because they say he cannot read and he cannot write. But I submit that I saw a video when he was doing like a special some years ago that somebody came and gave him a piece of paper and he looked like he read that to me. But anyway, when you write a song, even if if he's singing the song, someone has to write these words down. And then someone has to they have to copyright it by either sending it to ASCAP or BMI, right? So this thing has to be in actually word form. This is why when you look up some of his lyrics, you will look up the lyrics for R. Kelly's song, and you will see all of these lyrics printed. That means somebody had to have read it. And people may say, oh, this is censoring and you're a musician and you have the right to your artistry. But then why is it that many musicians speak about some of their songs being shelved? If no one is censoring music, why is it that according to the narrative, his own narrative, if I'm not mistaken, Solar Coaster, he has a whole set of music that was shelved by the record industry that was not released to the public. So one has to conclude that there is some censoring going on, and they determine what goes out and what does not, even after the artist has produced it. I say all that to say that allowing an individual to build a platform on uh, lewd and lascivious lyrics, you know what I'm saying, targeting a certain demographic for umpteen years, shows that there was some complicitness that we also hopefully need to examine when we're having this discussion. Not to absolve the individual of any guilt, but as the lawyer said, he's not the only one who did it. Then we have to take a look at who is allowing it, and even the greater question, why? And then we have to go back to what Grimke said. I'm gonna call her Grimke. What Grimke said is that this is unless the testimony of one against the other, the one slave against the other, is only permitted when it's to the advantage of the master. I'll leave you with that. Hopefully you read up on that, because I'm going to come back and talk a little bit more about the so-called feminist movement. Now, I'm not talking about the 1970s, so please do not send me any hate mail below this video. I'm talking about the women's rights movement and the truth about the history of that before we get to the 1960s and 70s, which I think is important to this conversation, because when we look at the male-female dynamic and the blame game that happens, we see that a lot of men automatically blame the feminist movement for the destruction of the black, so-called black family, which is not really intellectually honest. You know what I'm saying? That's not really honest to say that the feminist movement destroyed the black family all the way in the 60s and 70s. So we have to look at where that's coming from, who's saying it, and why it was beneficial for them to paint this narrative. So we'll come back and talk more about that. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I have so much I want to say, but I'm going to leave it at that for now. Everybody have a blessed night. Leave your comments below. Feel free to like, share this video. And we're going to be having a slavery roundtable coming up. So if you would like to participate in that, just drop some info under the box and I'll hit you up, and then we can arrange that. Okay. Thank you so much. Everybody have a blessed night.